Lucy was both curious and scared when she found the eggs under her bed. She didn't know what kind of eggs they were or where they had come from, so she decided to call someone who could identify them. After making a few phone calls, she finally found an expert willing to come and take a look. The expert arrived quickly and examined the eggs carefully. As he looked at them, his face turned pale and his eyes grew wide with fear. He then said, "These aren't normal eggs. We need to leave your house immediately." Lucy's parents weren't happy about all the fuss, especially with Lucy involved. They tried to discuss whether they really needed to leave, but soon realized this was serious, and it was in their best interest to go as soon as possible. After hearing the expert's words, everyone was silent. At first, the eggs just seemed strange, but after the expert's examination, they realized there was something much more concerning about them. They couldn't believe what they were hearing and demanded an explanation. But there was no time to pack their bags. They had to leave immediately. Lucy watched as her parents hurried out, led by the expert and his team. This experience changed Lucy forever. What was so dangerous about these odd-looking eggs? Why was the expert so frightened, and why did they have to leave the house so quickly? Lucy, like any other young girl, is afraid of what may or may not live under her bed. For that reason, she checks her bed every morning, and so also this Sunday morning when she suddenly saw several incredibly strange eggs. She didn't know what hit her, and this was just the beginning. Lucy is shocked and immediately runs downstairs. She yells for her parents, who don't respond at first. When she finally has their attention, she tells her parents about the eggs. They don't believe her at first, but when they see the fear in her eyes, they go upstairs with her. Now, it wasn't just Lucy who was in shock. Her parents, Ben and Haley, were also shocked. By now, they asked the little girl if she really didn't put them there herself, but immediately see that she is innocent. Ben tries to gently touch one of the eggs, but then feels that they are very warm. "Watch out, Ben." Ben and Haley call an expert to reassure Lucy and get the eggs removed quickly, as they were warm and could hatch soon. The expert arrived within 15 minutes but hesitated to go upstairs immediately. Instead, he showed Ben and Haley photos and asked if the eggs in the photos matched the ones upstairs. When they pointed out the match, the expert was visibly shaken and insisted on going upstairs immediately, making Lucy even more scared. The expert entered Lucy's room and inspected under the bed with a flashlight, staying silent for several minutes while the family anxiously waited. Suddenly, he screamed in horror, breaking his earlier calm. Ben, worried for Lucy, demanded answers, but the expert brushed him off, saying he needed backup. Haley tried to get a clearer answer, but the expert struggled to speak, glancing nervously at Lucy. The situation left the family more frightened and confused, wondering just how dangerous these eggs could be. Meanwhile, the expert gets in touch with his backup. He tries to explain everything well to them, but it seems like he has to repeat himself several times. That could only mean that his backup didn't understand much of it. Finally, the expert hangs up, waiting for the backup. Not much later, the backup actually arrives. It was a whole team. They hardly pay attention to the family and only briefly nod to little Lucy. They go straight to Lucy's bedroom, where they could carefully begin to lift a better way. The operations could begin. But as soon as the bed is moved, the expert's colleague is also shocked. After carefully inspecting the eggs, the team takes a moment to discuss. Ben tries to eavesdrop but can't hear them. It is clear to him that they seem quite distraught. Soon after, it seemed the team had made up its mind. They decided to call the police. Ben is shocked. Was it that bad? What were the police really needed? He had never seen the police before in his neighborhood, and now he feared for his own innocence. He knew he had nothing to do with this, but the idea of the police officer still terrified him. Meanwhile, the police officer in charge arrives. He looks around seriously and has an obligatory chat with Ben and Haley. Unfortunately, he has little to say and tries to reassure them with empty words. Soon after, he joins other agents and experts. A discovery has been made. Ben, Haley, and little Lucy try to get closer, yet they still don't hear anything because the experts and the police officers are whispering. This was clearly information that they could not share directly with the family. Ben noticed one of the officers reacting strangely, with wide eyes showing shock. It was clear this was news the officers had never heard before. Losing patience, Ben joined the group, who immediately stopped whispering. He demanded an explanation. As Ben demanded answers, the officers stepped back in surprise and ordered him to stay where he was and lie on the ground, saying he could be infected with something. Ben was in disbelief, especially when he saw his daughter Lucy crying outside, surrounded by armed police. Unable to stand it, he ran toward them but was quickly shoved to the ground. Thankfully, a kind officer gently took care of Lucy, which gave Ben some relief. Ben, Lucy, and his wife, Hilly, were then separated and put into different police cars. He was left wondering what was happening. A few minutes later, Ben saw a person in a protective suit entering the house. Hours passed before anyone approached him, deepening the mystery. Finally, someone informed Ben that he and his family needed to be taken away. Was he being arrested? As they drove away, Ben noticed that the driver wasn't a police officer but someone in a white suit. Confused and worried, he asked questions, but they remained silent. After a 2.5-hour drive, they arrived at an airport, where Ben was escorted onto a waiting helicopter. He had no idea where they were going or why, but the fear and uncertainty were overwhelming. As Ben flew through the air, his mind raced with questions. Were his family also here? Despite his curiosity, he knew asking wouldn't work. Suddenly, a man spoke up. "We're almost there, just 5 minutes away." Ben arrived at a base camp that seemed like a military camp, but there was something different about it. He had never seen anything like it before. The strange equipment and unfamiliar faces left him with an uneasy feeling. As soon as the helicopter landed, another team of white-suited people arrived and grabbed Ben by the arms. They whisked him away into a nearby building where they locked him up in a cell. The stark, cold surroundings made him feel isolated and trapped. Why had he been brought here? And what was to become of him? Just 24 hours earlier, Ben had been enjoying a peaceful dinner with his family. Now he found himself locked up in a cell, uncertain of his fate. 2 hours later, a man answered Ben's call, fully packed with a white suit. He introduced himself as Chris, who claimed to work for a secret force team. He apologized for the situation but insisted their actions had been necessary. Ben demanded answers, but Chris remained mysterious about it. Ben's first concern was for his family, especially his daughter Lucy. He aggressively demanded to know where they were taken. Chris looked at him with concern, hesitating before speaking. Finally, he said, "I have to tell you something." Ben's heart pounded as he demanded, "Tell me what's happening to Lucy." Struggling to stay calm, he felt a wave of dread wash over him as he waited for Chris to respond. The suspense was almost unbearable. Chris handed Ben a glass of water, helping him calm down. Ben felt ashamed for losing control but listened intently as Chris spoke. "It's about your daughter," Chris said gravely. Chris explained that Lucy had fallen seriously ill after arriving at the facility. It was something called DX, but Ben had no idea what that meant. His mind raced with questions. What kind of virus was this and how serious was her condition? Chris remained vague about the virus, saying it was top secret. Ben's priority was seeing his daughter, but Chris informed him that he needed to be tested for the virus first. Anxious and afraid, Ben agreed. After being tested and relieved to find he wasn't infected, Ben was desperate to see Lucy. As they walked down the hallway, Ben bombarded Chris with questions about the virus and its connection to the mysterious egg. Chris was evasive, warning that some things were better left unsaid. Finally, Chris offered a bit more information, acknowledging that since Lucy was severely affected, Ben deserved to know more. But first, they needed to run more tests to be sure. As Ben entered Lucy's room, he was shocked to see her looking so pale and drained. The question that haunted him was whether she would survive this ordeal. Chris remained silent, unbearable to offer any reassurance. The virus was not well understood and survival rates were very low, particularly in the case of children. Ben's heart raced as Chris spoke. "What is it?" Ben asked urgently. "It's risky, but it might work," Chris replied, looking determined yet uncertain. They needed to act fast. Chris suggested that if Ben's blood was transfused to his daughter, it might help her body fight the virus. Without hesitation, Ben agreed to the procedure. After the transfusion, they hummed the bag of blood to drip into Lucy's veins, and all they could do was wait. Curious about the mysterious egg that caused the virus, Ben asked Chris for more information. Chris agreed to tell him on the condition that Ben signed a contract to keep the details secret. Desperate to save his daughter, Ben signed without hesitation. Chris revealed that the virus came from the egg of a strange creature, possibly extraterrestrial. Ben couldn't understand how it ended up in Lucy's room, but knew he had to stay focused on saving her. Despite his disbelief, Ben accepted the situation, trusting the contract he had signed. Anxiously, Ben asked about Lucy's condition. He was immensely relieved to hear that his blood had worked and Lucy had finally woken up. After days of uncertainty, Ben was reunited with his daughter. Due to the ongoing investigation, they were moved to a new house and Chris promised to keep him updated, hinting that there was more to the story than they knew.